Namaskar and welcome to Samvad. Today we have with us on Samvad Air Marshal Anil Chopra. Anil Chopra sir is a fighter pilot, he is a test pilot, and most importantly, he is the pioneer of the Mirage 2000 fleet in India. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
Thank you, Mayank. Always a pleasure to join with you, and you're doing a great service, producing some outstanding content and educating the masses. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we are diving directly into the issue at hand. So people are very curious as to what happened in the night of the 10th of May 2025 during Operation Sindu when we hit the 9 air bases and 3 radar sites of the Pakistani Army Air Force. And apparently the strikes were so deadly that within hours the Pakistani Army came running for a ceasefire. So I would request you to take us through the hits.
Yeah, Mahank, outstanding airstrikes both on the first day that we hit the terror targets, accuracies, the kind of damage, the kind of, videos and the pictures that the feedback that we got from the, battle damage assessment, absolutely outstanding. And in response to our initial strikes, we Pakistanis chose to hit our airfields and civilian targets from Jammu and Kashmir right down to Gujarat, Bhuj and Nalia. They hit with, mostly with drones and some smaller cruise missiles. And we all know that they could not create any damage. But the fact that they chose to hit military targets, and despite our caution to them that if you hit military targets, you will get a more than proportionate response. And I think that is what India did on 10th. We all know today that Indian Air Force had to do the heavy lifting. Bulk of the targets have to be deep. The deep, targets can be met only by the air power. Of course, the Indian Army and Navy made some outstanding contribution. They were guarding their borders. The Navy had blockaded the Arabian Sea, and practically no shipping could have gone through. And since the heavy lifting had to be done, so the airstrikes were planned. These were military targets which were very, very, very important. And I will go over some of these targets because you have to hit military infrastructure, you have to hit runways, you have to hit ammunition dumps, you have to hit radars, you have to hit, command and control centers. All kinds of things will be targeted, and see the types of airfields that we choose. Let's go one by one. I must mention, where is Noor Khan airfield? Noor Khan was a second air chief, very popular air chief, a good chief, had good relations with India. He, on his name is the airfield at Chaklala, which is very close to Islamabad, which is the capital, very close to Rawalpindi, which is the general headquarters of the Pakistan Army. And what a good airfield to select. And I must tell you what is there in Noor Khan airfield. It has got their VVIP aircraft. They have got their refuelers, air-to-air refuelers. The entire lot is over there. They have some C-130s and some other communication aeroplanes of smaller nature. I must also mention it's not very far from Kirana Hills, the very famous Kirana Hills, which the Pakistanis said that they have some videos said that we had tried to hit, but the Indian Air Force later on denied having hit, because Kirana Hills is also known to have some of their nuclear facilities or maybe some weapons which are hiding in caves within the hills. So Noor Khan was an important air base. There are reports that one C-130 was hit on the tarmac. More destruction details are not there, but of course the airfield itself has been hit. You can see a cratered hole over there, also in a hangar. So this is what happened. Now, second airfield, from our young days in the Air Force, we have been hearing about Rafiki. Rafiki is close to Shortcoat. It's in the middle of Punjab, important air base, which has been a hub of their fighter squadrons initially. I think mostly the Mirage 3s and 5s were there. but JF-17s are gradually replacing some of these aircraft. So Rafiki was an important airfield. It takes, after Sargodha, it takes the largest chunk of Pakistani Air Force's air effort. So we hit Rafiki, we hit Murid, a relatively smaller, airfield, but also had radar and also had some ammo dump in Murid. So these were important. We also later on hit Sargodha. Sargodha, we all know, is 200 kilometers deep. It's it's the far end of Punjab, and there they have the top end aircraft, including F-16s. Not far from Sargodha is also there, airborne nuclear vector. So some of these airfields were very, very important targets. And as I said, we also hit the radar sites, weapons storage areas in Murid, Chaklala, of course, we just spoke about near Rawalpindi. Rahim Yar Khan is another airfield that we hit. Rahim Yar Khan is a civil airport now, but is used also for military operations. And we all saw the pictures of the hole that has been dug into Rahim Yar Khan. Sukkar is another place where we also have their Heidel works. Sukkar, we hit some targets. And in Chunyan in Punjab, these were some of the targets we hit. We hit the radar at Pasrur, and we also hit the aviation center hub at Sialkot. Later, we also went to Skardu. We all know Skardu is the northernmost airfield, opposite Leh, you may say. We hit Buladi and Jakokabad, and as I said, we hit Sargodha. So this is the kind of targets we have hit. We have used precision weapons. They have long range. You know that some of the weapons used were scalp. We also used some anti-radiation weapons like Harop, which are loitering munitions. And we have, of course, we have reports that we perhaps used the BrahMos. So this is how we targeted the, military targets. It's undoubtedly the next normal that we have set by carrying out this aviation strikes. Yes.
So when we talk of hitting so deep inside any enemy territory, sir, there are, we hear that the Indian Air Force was hitting from inside India, sir. But once you hit targets so deep, do the Indian Air Force planes actually cross over and make a hit, or they stay inside Indian territory and the target and the technology is so precise that everything is done from inside Indian territory?
Meg, till 65 and 71 war, you didn't have this kind of standoff weapons. You perforce had to go deep, strike yourself, either in Canberras or fighter aircraft. They went deep, striking airfields with either, dumb bombs or gravity bombs, what we call iron bombs. They didn't have any, means of a precision attack. Nor were the ranges there. A weapon had to be dropped from as close as maybe 8-10 kilometers at best. But now, after we have seen what has happened in Ukraine and Russia war, in the first 2 months, both the Russians lost nearly 50 aircraft which had tried to go into Ukraine and try to destroy their targets, because the air defenses in Ukraine, especially the ones which had been given by the West, were knocking off the aircraft or helicopters or whatever came into their territories. Similarly, the Russians had, through their aircraft initially and later on through cruise missiles and standoff weapons, had destroyed most of the Ukrainian Air Force. So now look at this new term that evolved. It is called air denial. Air denial means that both sides are denying the other side's aircraft to be able to come into your own territory. And this lesson had been very well imbibed by the whole world, certainly by Indian Air Force and also to some extent by Pakistan Air Force. So there was no question of crossing over, because the moment you will cross over strong air defenses, we already knew that they have 4 HQ-9 or equivalent systems, or HQ-16 FE. From the Chinese, we all know that that's equivalent of a S-300, which has got a range of close to 250 kilometers. So therefore, you had to carry out everything from your own territory and not come very closer. Mind you, for scalp, you don't have to come very close because it has got a range of 550 kilometers. But for hammer and some other weapons, you might have to come closer, but still you will be in your own territory, because with hammer you will perhaps target targets which are very much closer to the border. So the point I'm making is that neither side crossed the border. In any case, I must tell you, Pakistan Air Force is designed to be a defensive air force. They do not have sufficient assets to come and try and strike India. All that they struck India was through drones and cruise missiles. I also mentioned that we all heard about Turkish aircraft coming and a ship coming, bringing a lot of drones for Pakistan. You remember that the day we had Pahalgam, our Prime Minister had already announced that we are going to hit them and going to hit them hard, not only the terrorists, but also their backers. So the signal was very clear. After Balakot, Pakistan was not going to take chances. So they immediately mustered their friends, China and Turkey, to get a large consignment of drones, because on their own, they cannot manufacture such large numbers. So significant numbers, a few thousands of them, had been brought in that period before 7th of May, when the strikes actually sort of went through. So this is how the air battles of the future are going to be fought. There's going to be technology, there's going to be precision, there is going to be standoff weapons, longer ranges weapons, and of course there'll be electronic warfare and cyber, which will play its own game within these strikes. Yes.
Sir, when an opposition air force gains complete control of the skies through standoff weapons and technology, sir, what is the impact on the side which is defending? In this case, the Pakistanis. So was this decision to run for a ceasefire actually based on the damage which had been done by the Indian Air Force on the Pakistani airfields?
Yeah, I must mention that, notwithstanding wars, normally the military hotlines are always kept live, so that, the escalation is managed, between the two sides, so that everybody knows when we hit their terror targets, the Pakistan was informed that, okay, we have hit your terrorist targets, and we have no intention to hit your civil and military targets. And so they were conscious of it. But since there are no terror targets in India, and they have to do some face saving with their own public, so they had to come and hit some targets in India. As I said, they had a large number of small drones which they had acquired. But unlike India, which has got much bigger, and longer range cruise missiles, as well as loiter munitions of the kind of Harop and Harpy, so we were having a clear advantage in the air. You cannot call it, you can call it air dominance. You cannot call it, favorable air situation, because nowadays, you have to do all the fighting from long ranges. So this is how it is. So what happened is, after they were hit at so many military airfields, and they had not hit, they claimed to have hit us S-400, and we saw that the Prime Minister yesterday went to Adampur and he stood next to the S-400, which they had claimed to have hit. And similarly, the drones and missiles, some of the missiles we have actually captured live, because they didn't function, they didn't explode, and they can be subsequently analyzed. So clearly, they were under pressure. You all know that, bulk of Pakistan's fuel is smuggled from Iran through private trucks by smugglers. We all know that they had already were with the IMF that time in the middle of the war conflict, and they were, begging for money. There was a tremendous amount of pressure. They don't have enough stocks of weapons for more than 4-5 days, and therefore they had to. When they saw such a massive airstrike covering about 12, 13 airfields and targets, they had no choice but to request for a ceasefire. And that is the background of the pressure that the Indian Air Force was able to put on them. Yes.
So from whatever is available in public domain, there is a very strong, what should I say, a very strong narrative which is coming out that India actually hit the nuclear weapon sites or nuclear command centers of the Pakistani Air Force and the Pakistani Army. What is your assessment about it?
Yeah, so let me tell you, this the Indian government has, of course, Indian Air Force DG Air Ops, who gave the briefing, has denied anything like that, and he said that we never hit, Kerala Hills. Even if they did hit, that's not in public domain. But surely one aircraft from USA has flown in here that's got the capability to check radiation levels, and also there are materials which have been brought in to contain radiation. Now, see, two earthquakes took place in this period. We do not know. There are different narratives in the air. One is that maybe they did some nuclear test and called it an earthquake, or as we said, that some strike of ours has actually hit. Now, in public domain, the strike part is not very, very clear, and therefore, I think this event will come out in more details as we go by, because once the radiation levels and how they're containing it, more details are available about them, that we'll be able to know, yes.
So there's been this, drone warfare. This has been the in thing, or should I say the go-to thing in the modern air warfare. So the Russia-Ukraine war, even Iran, and then this Israel, Iran, Palestine, Hamas thing. This time also, there were a lot of talk of the Turkish drones, which could have done a lot of damage to Indian airfields, Indian civilians, because they don't matter, they don't bother about who's dying on our side. So how did our air defenses, because we saw everything was on TV, we were seeing our air defenses system working. So the S-400, the indigenous, what are your views on the Indian air defense system operations in actual war situation?
Yeah. So before that, Mayank, I must mention about these, their quality of drones vis-a-vis ours. As I said, immediately after the Galwan crisis, large powers were given, emergency powers were given to the three services. A large quantity of heavy munitions, lighter munitions, had been procured by India in that period of 4 or 5 years that went by in between. So therefore, we had to be very struck. I also didn't mention that in the strikes, it was not only just the Air Force. There were strikes carried out by the Indian Army using the indigenous striker, drones, which were launched primarily on targets in Pakistan-occupied J&K, because they were launched from the border areas in Kashmir and Jammu by Indian Army, and they were extremely successful. And since it is indigenous, much larger quantities can be bought and are already being bought. But coming back to your question, you see, India has created a integrated counter-UAS grid. Now, in this grid are everybody: the Army, Navy, Air Force, the BSF, and various other agencies who are. So now, what is this grid all about? The Army and the BSF could be using sniper rifles. There are special net guns which are used to take on drones. Thereafter, there are air defense systems of the Army and the Air Force in this case, because we are at the border. And also some of the systems of the Navy were available because we were all fighting an integrated organization. All were available to the Air Force and Army. So this integrated counter drone system has got other missiles. Of course, there's Akash, there is Pichora and OSA air defense system. We have got the Shilka guns, we have the L-70 guns. There are many weapon systems which can take on. Of course, the S-400 is there, but S-400 you don't waste on very, very small sized drones. You look at only very big cruise missile or large, loiter munition or something like that. So therefore, there is an integrated grid. I must also mention that we all know about the integrated command and control system, command and control system that Indian Air Force has set up. Over the years, that's got integrated with the Army and the Navy, and therefore everybody gets to know the threat perception, what is happening on the border all the time. So therefore, this had these two things, the counter drone grid as well as the ISCCS has been a great boon to the country, and therefore we were able to neutralize practically all the drones that came. Some very small ones which passed by were not capable of any damage. Some were decoys, some were FPVs, that means first point of view type of drones, which in any case can't do any damage, but ones which carried some warhead were neutralized, by a grid, yes.
So when a threat of this sort occurs, I mean, it is not a standalone approach by any force. You are already talking of the integrated system. So how does any armed forces, sir, in Army, Navy, and the Air Force and the BSF, as you said, sir, how does this system come into one and become one? How does it integrate? How does it work?
You see, in peacetime, normally standalone, BSF is guarding our borders. We know that Pakistani send some drones, smugglers send some drones, they send some arms, some narcotics. They keep coming in. Normally, BSF at its own level handles this by their snipers. They have got their sensors, they have got small radars, they have got, also acoustic and various other types of sensors. And of course, there are people who are looking out for such drone crossings, and they are being shot by using whatever weapons the BSF has got. But what is the meaning of integration? See, the entire defense of the country is the responsibility of the Air Force. So Air Force is the basic integrator who has to connect all the sensors of the three services into one grid. So that the first part is to be able to detect the incoming raid or the threat or the drone or the cruise missile. And the next is engagement. Who must engage which one? Is centrally decided. There are computer software, there is AI, and weapons are assigned, and the control of the weapons is done centrally by the sector directors in that area. So it is a very, very synchronized activity to defend the country from such a attack. Not only the drone attack, if tomorrow the fighter aircraft or some other projectiles were to come, then you will the integrated air defense system will take over that also. Yes.
The Operation Sindu started on the 7th of May when the Indian Air Force hit Bahawalpur and Muridke primarily, and there are other centers also, Muridke and
Yeah.
Bahawalpur. And
Yeah.
it was reported that the Lahore Airport air defense system had been taken off by the Indian Air Force. So how
Yes.
strong was the dominance of the Air Force over the Pakistani skies? Because they also retaliated. So how strong was the dominance from the very first day, that is May 7th?
Yeah, you see, first is that the May 7 attack, there was a level of surprise. We also know that some of their, training centers had been vacated. Certainly in the POK, they had vacated them. They had announced it. We all knew intelligence inputs were available. So, but they had perhaps not expected that we will go to Bahawalpur, where the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters sitting, or they didn't think that we'll attack the LET, centers at Muridke. So these two targets, they were perhaps not sure that we will take the guts to, attack four targets in Punjab and five in POK. And this was a very, very significant, break from the normal that we have had past. We remember that in 2008, after Mumbai attacks, we were still dilly-dallying and doing diplomacy and trying to shame Pakistan around the world. But it's only in 2016, after the Uri Brigade attack, that we did our first cross-border strike. And thereafter, of course, after we did the Balakot, after Pulwama. And graded increase in action was taking place. And of course, after Pahalgam, the next normal has been set now. So we know that we went to the various places that we went and hit the JEM chief's Maulana Masoor's residence, and we all know that more than 10 of his family members, including his brother, who's next in the line, have got killed. And Markaza Taibi at Murid was the main training center for the LET, and then we have neutralize that. It was a place where religious indoctrination was being done. There were people who were being rooted there normally. The official figures are that about 130 people have been killed, terrorists have been killed. That's what the Ministry of Defense has announced. So there has been and in some of the sites, a little more, maybe total 150 to 200 in all have been, hit. What we have hit is, some of the targets, we are very conscious that we will not do collateral damage. We don't want to hit a religious site, but some of their terrorist center, training centers were sitting next to a mosque or under a mosque. They have been using the civilians like we saw the Hamas doing, using civilians as shield. We also know that they try to use the airliners as a shield for themselves, in flight. So therefore, they have been using such tactics primarily to get world opinion against us for having hit some civilian. But I think great maturity and accuracy of the Indian armed forces, we did not hit any civilian targets. Yes.
So this conflict, a very short conflict, has shown that the requirement of a very strong air power. And
Yeah.
it is no secret that the power of the Indian Air Force number-wise has been depleting over a period of time. So what would your suggestion be to the armed forces, to the political leadership? Because we have seen how this is playing out and the future is before us. So how to go about it now?
All conflicts from Iraq, Afghanistan, to the ones in Azerbaijan, Armenia, then in Ukraine and Russia, bulk of the operations have been by air. There were some ground incursions. We remember that the Russians tried to head for Kyiv. They got bogged down. They had to walk back. And thereafter, barring the Ukrainian thrust in Kursk, and of course the retaliation by the Russian army, bulk of the operations have been air. Second, huge quantities. The quantities of drones used in the war in Ukraine, Russia is in millions. The average consumption every year is 1.5 million drones. Of course, there are many of them very small, but even a small kamikaze drone with a warhead in it can cause significant damage. And since they are sent in very large numbers, so clearly the way we fight has changed in the last few decades, but now most certainly in the last 3-4 years. So there is need for building your inventories, building your doctrines to this kind of a new warfare. Mind you, there are other things in this whole exercise. There is cyber and electronic warfare, directed energy weapons, lasers. In future, you don't have to have guns to shoot down drones. You will use a laser, a high-powered, very accurate laser, and you will be able to repeat using that laser again and again every few seconds. You don't require logistics of carrying a large number of munitions and bullets and shells from one place to the other. So there are technologies which are bringing next new levels of breakthroughs, and there is a need for building. Now, the critical point I want to make here is that this conflict is from a trigger event. Unlike Ukraine-Russia war, which was, coming, some signals were there for 3-4 months before that, but this is a trigger instant. So the importance of building capability all the time. It's like a cold start. And it's a dynamic cold start. It means you're changing the thoughts, you're changing ideas. You hit terrorist targets, tomorrow you hit military targets, not hit many complexities. So the point that you're making about capability building, especially for the Indian Air Force, we have been telling, the chiefs have been telling, chief after chief, we require more fighter aircraft. But more than just fighter aircraft, you require AEWC, you require air refuelers, you require, large inventories of drones, of large, loiter munitions. And I'm happy to say that government in the last after Galwan had given a lot of powers to the service vice chiefs to be able to procure large quantities. Now, during this conflict, also the powers have been further increased, much larger quantities are allowed. The interface with our own industry, private industry, the drone industry is phenomenal. The government, I am an advisor to Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. We have nearly 700 defense companies which are part of us. We're all the time interfacing between the government and these industries. And the industry is very happily, patriotically coming forward with helping build inventories. And therefore, capability building is a continuous process. You have to prepare for a war today. You're prepared for war that will happen tomorrow. That is the urgency at any given time. There has been a proposal by the many think tanks, including by me, that we need to increase the defense budget for at least 10, 15 years. Maybe the percentage has to go up. We see in the whole of all European countries, NATO, Japan, South Korea, everybody has shot up their defense budgets. There is action. You look at the defense budgets now of countries like Israel, Iran, everybody's defense budgets are shooting up. We are very much threatened, and therefore defense budgets will go up. Our economy has to continue to grow, because then only the defense budget has any meaning. Because if it's a percentage of GDP, if the GDP doesn't go up fast enough, a good growth rate for India, which should be anywhere between 7 to 8 or 9% of growth every year. And that is how the country will be able to. But capability building, as you asked, Indian Air Force, as I mentioned, requires fighter aircraft, FRAs, the AEWC, and large quantities of precision cruise missiles, drones, large inventories, yes.
Sir, one final question. Tom Cooper, the Australian military historian, and he's a combat civil aviation analyst also, he said that this is a clear-cut victory in inverted commas for the Indian Air Force. If you were to describe this conflict and the resolution part in one sentence, what would it be?
You know, there is undoubtedly, because the only side which hit and brought proof of hitting military targets, all of them. You have videos, you have got a battle damage assessment, you have got pictures. See, you remember after Balakot, there was such a big issue about with other pictures, where did you hit the target or not? This time India was very conscious that the world has to be shown the success of your strike. So every strike you have got battle damage assessment and pictures which have been shown to the whole world. The government has, yesterday we veterans were briefed by the government. Yesterday also the defense attaches of all the countries were brought together, other than, of course, China and Turkey, and they were briefed centrally of what we did and what did we achieve. Undoubtedly, the Indian Air Force has reached the next level of professional respect by doing the kind of accurate strikes they did and cover the entire country. It's not in public domain, but I think it has come yesterday that even Malir in Karachi was hit. There's a radar there and a small, your military complex. So there is no part of Pakistan from Skardu to Karachi and as deep as Sargodha that had not been hit. So this is the spread of kind of strikes that we have done at military targets, and therefore there is no discussion. The only target which they claimed was Adhampur S-400, and we all know S-400 is standing tall and done an outstanding job during this war. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for sparing time for us and sharing your views on what the Indian Air Force and the Indian Armed Forces in total did during Operation Sindoor. Although it's just been suspended, as the Prime Minister said, that we will respond when it comes, if at all the Pakistan still has the nonsensical idea of bleeding India through 1,000 cuts. Thank you so much, sir. And through you, I use this opportunity to congratulate you and the Indian Air Force on a very successful operation and defending all of us. Thank you and Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayank. And I know the armed forces are still on hot standby. They are at top stations. And God forbid Pakistan tries another trick, they will be hit so hard that they'll bleed from all over. Yes, thank you
Thank you,
and
sir.
God bless you.
Thank
Yeah,
thank you, sir.
yeah.